You need to know these 5 things before you move to New Zealand. Whether you're planning a long-term stay or just a short-term adventure, this video is going to cover the must-know insights that are super important to have in your mind when you're making the decision to move to my home country, New Zealand. Now, these 5 things you're not going to find easily on Google. They come from my personal experiences and from experiences that I've heard from other people who have lived, worked, studied or visited New Zealand just for a short period of time. I wanted to make this video because I know that you can't find everything on Google, and I wanted to help you maybe fill in that research gap that you have and help you answer some questions that maybe can only be answered by someone who has lived here or someone who kind of knows what life is like in New Zealand. I think it's always good to have an on-the-ground opinion of certain things that could impact your life and help you make that decision. So let's dive into the real deal about New Zealand. Before we get started, in case you don't know me, my name is Maddie. I am your Kiwi best friend and I am here to help you with all things New Zealand from a New Zealander. So let's get into it. Number 1. In New Zealand, you have to make your own fun. What does this mean? This means that basically New Zealand is not so big. Our cities are not so big. And our cultural or art scene is also very, very limited, which means that the kind of things that you can do for fun here are very limited in terms of organized events. So the vibes that you get when you think of maybe Amsterdam, Berlin, London, big city vibes where you're kind of just a number in a big group of people and there's so much to do and there's so many interesting characters, personalities, there's groups for everybody. We don't have that so much here. I'm from Auckland, which is our biggest city, which is really not so big. And the things that you can do on a weekend that are cultural based or that are aimed towards young people, people around my age, I'm 27, are very, very limited. And in the other parts of the country, it's obviously going to be even more limited. And this means that a lot of people I have spoken to that are not from New Zealand, who come to New Zealand to live, they have told me, I don't like New Zealand. New Zealand is boring. There's nothing to do. But I completely disagree. I think there's so much to do. You just have to know how to use your environment to your advantage. We have some of the most beautiful landscapes, beautiful nature. Yes, it's harder to just leave your house and find things to do. You have to be a lot more intentional here. You have to make plans. You have to get your group of people together and organize to go for a waterfall hike or go to a beach that you haven't been before. And you have to use what you have around you to make it fun. So no, fun is not just going to appear in front of you, and you might struggle to find a social life in the beginning. But once you have it, it's great. Yes, maybe it's going to be a bit harder, might take more time, but I promise New Zealand is not boring. And if you give it a chance and you really work hard and you find your social circle, then you're going to have plenty to do. And if you think it's boring and you think there isn't enough of one cultural event or one arts or one niche, then make it yourself. And the other thing I always say is that the activities that we do have a lot of here, like going to the beach, hiking, waterfalls, swimming, it's all free. It's all accessible. So you should really make the most of those and use what you have to your advantage. Of course, these kinds of activities aren't everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody wants to go for a hike. Not everybody is able to do all these physical activities. But I just thought it was important to note that these are the kind of things that we as New Zealanders do on the weekend. So for example, me and my friends, if we're going to hang out, we go for a walk. That is like our base activity. That is the thing that would be our default if we don't have another plan. We'll grab a coffee and we'll go to the beach, we'll go for a walk, we'll go see a waterfall. That is our typical weekend. Moving on to number 2. New Zealanders are notorious for having something called tall poppy syndrome. Now this probably has another name in your country. It's a very common phenomenon. Basically, it means that it's generally frowned upon to boast your success. So if you're doing really well in something, if you've had a lot of success recently, if things are going really well for you, or you've just achieved something that you've worked really hard for, that's great. New Zealanders will think it's great. But what they don't think is great is to talk about it, to boast about it, to be arrogant about it. They want you to be humble. So they don't want you to be a tall poppy. They want to, I guess the expression is to cut you back down to size. So instead of celebrating your success very openly and telling everybody about it, it is more normal in New Zealand to be humble and to attribute your success to other things or other people and kind of divide the success. And you'll see this a lot with our Olympian athletes or people who go on the television. They've just won an Olympic gold medal and they say, oh yeah, no, it was thanks to this person or thanks to my team, thanks to my mom, thanks to my coach. They never really accept it 100% as their own success, as something that they have done. This tall poppy syndrome is really a shame. I think if you've done something well for yourself, you should be proud of it, and you should also get to be proud of it. We should be celebrating people for doing great things and not expecting them to be humble all the time. Of course, it's good to be humble, but if you've just won a gold medal, like, come on. The reason I mentioned tall poppy syndrome in this video is just to give you a heads up, basically, that if you are at a space with New Zealanders, at your workspace, with your colleagues, with new friends, and you're talking really excitedly about something, or you're boasting about something, or if you're celebrating something that's important to you and you don't get kind of the reaction you're looking for from New Zealanders, it's probably because it's part of the culture that we have, unfortunately, to not appreciate these successes. This is something that sucks to have as part of our culture, but I do think it is slowly changing, and I think we are kind of adopting a more accepting approach to other people's success. Number 3, New Zealand is so different to Australia. There are so many differences between New Zealand and Australia, and I know a lot of the time people overseas bunch us together because we are quite similar in culture, and if you meet a Kiwi, a New Zealander and an Australian, sometimes if you're not used to it, our accents will sound the same, and our mannerisms and our personality, our laid-back attitudes are pretty similar. So I don't blame anybody for that, but country-wise and living-wise, very different. So I think it's important to know. Firstly, and probably the biggest difference, is the weather. It's cold in New Zealand. The water is cold. We have cold winters. We get a lot of snow, both in the North and the South Island, and nowhere near the temperatures that Australia gets in terms of the hot weather. So if you do come to New Zealand, just remember, it's not a hot and dry country like Australia, which has a lot of desert in it. We have a lot of mountains, a lot of beaches, and yes, the water is freezing pretty much all year round. I love it because I'm used to going for a swim and the water is cold. But just in terms of climate and what kind of weather you like and what kind of weather you enjoy, it is definitely much colder in New Zealand than it is in Australia. That being said, it is summer right now and we are having some really nice, beautiful, warm days. So it's not to say that we don't get heat, but it's definitely not to the level that you get in Australia. Another thing about the cold weather, unfortunately, a lot of the houses here in New Zealand were built very poorly, and still I think are being built very poorly, meaning the houses are very cold. So when you are inside, you will be needing to wear your slippers, your hoodies, your blankets, everything. So make sure you're prepared for that. Another big difference is we don't have all those dangerous animals that can kill you like they do in Australia. This is a big misconception that I hear all the time. Like, oh, in New Zealand you have this and this and this snake and this spider and this jellyfish. We don't have any of those native. Of course, there are always animals that are being brought in that aren't native to New Zealand, but we have so many beautiful native birds, native reptiles, and we also have one spider that lives most of the time underground, if I'm not wrong. My New Zealand followers can tell me. But we do not have any snakes or any poisonous jellyfish or anything like that. For all of those kind of creatures, Australia. This means when you're going for a bushwalk or you're at the beach or anywhere in New Zealand, you don't have to be all the time looking out for what's going to hurt you. There is no danger, you can relax. And the last thing that I mentioned earlier is, of course, our attitudes are very similar. So in this sense, the cultures aren't so different. I know that the living wage at the moment in the economy in Australia is much better, and a lot of New Zealanders and Australians do swap countries. A lot of New Zealanders go to live in Australia because the wages are much better. They also have better infrastructure, better public transport. They're basically our big brother, and they do a lot of things better than us, and we're trying to catch up. But I still would prefer to live here than Australia. But that's my personal opinion, and of course I'm biased because I am a Kiwi. Number 4, do you know how to drive? In New Zealand, you're going to have to. Unfortunately, our public transport is super limited and we only have buses. We have a few trains, but the train network is very, very limited as well, which means that pretty much everyone in New Zealand has a car. Many houses will have multiple cars. You'll see cars parked up on the grass, on the curb, on the roadside, all belonging to one house, because unfortunately the public transport here is just not great. And in some cities, it's non-existent. It is a shame because obviously we try to be a clean, green country and we have so many people on the roads and so many people driving. Cycling is becoming bigger in New Zealand, but the landscape is not really great for it because there are so many hills, especially in Auckland. I think in Christchurch it's a bit flatter. But overall, from what I've heard from people who have just arrived to New Zealand, they have found that they are really stuck if they don't have a car, and it's one of the first things that they need to do when they get here is buy a car, because you really spend so much time waiting and trying to figure out how to get from one place to the other if you don't have a car and if you don't know how to drive. And lastly, number 5. New Zealand is very diverse. I live in Auckland, and Auckland is one of the most diverse cities in the world, I believe. And I can guarantee that no matter where you're from, there is likely to be a community of people from your home country that live somewhere in New Zealand. When you travel down south, in the South Island, it is a little less diverse than it is here in Auckland, and I think that is for many reasons, including accessibility, and also the largest airport is here. One of the great things about having such a diverse country and a diverse city here in Auckland is that we have so many different amazing types of foods available, and it's one thing that I love coming home to. I lived overseas for many, many years, and I didn't find the same kind of variety of food and restaurants that we have here in New Zealand. New Zealanders generally are very open to all nationalities. What I have heard from people who moved to New Zealand or who arrive or who have been traveling New Zealand, that they found that Kiwis are very friendly and open and they want to help, and those kind of things are great to hear, obviously. And I feel also personally embarrassed or disappointed if I hear that somebody has had a bad experience with a New Zealander, because it really is just not so common. And I wanted to mention that one as number 5 because I do just want to reinforce that I think everybody is welcome in New Zealand, and it doesn't matter where you're from, there's going to be a place here for you. We're a big country with not many people, and I personally love to see when someone who has arrived to New Zealand really feels at home here. So those are my 5 things I think you need to know before you move to New Zealand. I hope you like this video. If you're from New Zealand and you think there's something else that I should include for a part 2, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions about New Zealand as well, please leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. See ya!